Now, since Jennifer could not be with us tonight, I want to read in her stead a passage from her book, Goddess of the Market, Ayn Rand and the American Right. Because this follows somewhat on Mimi's theme, but brings us to an earlier period in the 1930s when Ayn Rand's agent was trying to sell We the Living as a novel. Let's try to put ourselves back to the 1930s. It began to dawn on Rand that there were communist sympathizers, or as she said, pinks, in America. At first she had assumed, quote, they did not matter in the least. This was the capitalist county of the world, and by everything I could observe, leftism or socialism was not an issue, she said. But now she began to hear that although publishers liked the book, they found its politics objectionable. Reviewers and editorial board members explained to Rand's agent that she was simply wrong about Soviet Russia and misunderstood the noble experiment being conducted there. High-profile visitors to Russia reinforced this perception. Important Americans who visited the USSR were given the red carpet treatment and credulously reported back the fantasy they had been fed. More than 10 years after the revolution, communism was finally reaching full flower, according to the New York Times reporter Walter Duranty, a Stalin fan who vigorously debunked accounts of the Ukrainian famine, a man-made disaster that would kill millions. In educated, reform-minded circles, it became conventional wisdom that the United States would simply have to move toward communism, or at the very least, socialism. Whittaker Chambers, a communist since the 1920s, remembered the party's sudden surge in popularity. Now, this is very important. He said, these were the first quotas of the great drift from Columbia, Harvard, and elsewhere. Now, I want to interject here for a moment, because if you have not heard of the Frankfurt School, it's extremely important that you know about it. It was a group of German Marxists who, after the Russian Revolution, planned to bring communism to all of Europe. But Hitler's fascist rise put an end to that all. And the Frankfurt School changed their name to the innocuous Institute for Social Research. And by design, infiltrated and were invited to Columbia University to bring their ideas here. This is the beginning of the studies series in the universities that spread. And the plan of the studies programs were to indoctrinate young students into communism. So this was all very much by design. If you don't know about the Frankfurt School, at least Google it. It's extremely important in the history of American politics. So we are back to Jennifer from 1930 on. A small intellectual army passed over to the Communist Party with scarcely any effort on its part. Many who did not join remained sympathetic fellow travelers. Nowhere was the mood more pronounced than in New York's artistic and literary circles. One of the party's most powerful front groups was the American Writers' Congress, which called for a, quote, new literature to support a new society. Quote, the Stalinists and their friends under multiform disguises have managed to penetrate into the offices of publishing houses, the editorial staffs of magazines, and the book review sections of conservative newspapers, end quote, wrote Philip Roth, founder of Partisan Review. The result was de facto censorship, he asserted, not that Roth was opposed to communism or Marxism. Indeed, he led the charge of the Trotskyites, a rival communist faction. The debate was not about the merits of communism. It was about what form of communism would be best. Then in 1936, the election did little to reassure. Roosevelt tacked hard to the left. During the campaign, he pounded away at, quote, economic royalists, quote, framing himself as the only responsible champion of the common man. Roosevelt's presidency set the terms of modern politics, establishing such institutions as Social Security, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the National Labor Board, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the Federal Communications Commission. He was creating the basic outlines of the administrative state. And that from Jennifer.